got the call, and I think the statement was like, I'm just going to lay the elephant on the table, like, you're not capable of running the company.
You sold Beautycounter to private equity, the Carlyle Group, in 2021 for $1 billion.
My investors wanted me to sell. You have no choice but to sell at some point if you take in significant amounts of other people's money. And I'd raised $80 million.
The New York Times called Beautycounter an MLM. What's your thought on that?
What we did have that came from the MLM business is that we allowed women to build teams.
What was harder for you, being removed as CEO or watching the company fail without you at the helm?
Watching this man come in who had absolutely no desire to partner with me in any way. It turned it from a brand that was sold for $1 billion to a business that was doing 50% in less than 2 years. That was really hard to watch.
But you buy the company out of foreclosure. What made you decide to do that?
I owed it to myself to see it through. I felt like there was unfinished work to be done.
I'm Sammy Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. Before we get started, I am going to ask for one tiny favor that will take you less than 30 seconds. If you're listening to this right now and you're not subscribed, pause, subscribe, and then hit play, and I will tell you all about today's guest. Subscribing really helps to support the show, so I very much appreciate it. Today's guest is a beauty founder whose story has everything: category creation, political lobbying, private equity, MLMs, and one of the most dramatic boomerang founder arcs in recent history. Gregg Renfrew is the founder of Beautycounter, arguably the brand that invented clean beauty since she came up with that term, and had a controversial but successful community sales model that had a lot in common with an MLM model. That's the multi-level marketing model used by companies like Mary Kay and Avon. Beautycounter had a fairy tale $1 billion private equity acquisition in 2021 until sales started falling post-deal. Next, Gregg was actually pushed out of Beautycounter, the company that she built from the ground up. Gregg then bought the company out of foreclosure in 2024, shut it down for over a year, and relaunched it as Counter. Today, she shares what went wrong with that private equity deal, whether founders should be irreplaceable, and why she moved away from the exact model that she utilized at Beautycounter. We also talk about advice for anyone who is scared to start over after a public chapter that didn't go the way that they had hoped. And because this is Social Currency, I also get Gregg's hot takes on the beauty industry. This is Gregg Renfrew's Social Currency. Gregg Renfrew, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you for having me.
So your early work was in the wedding world. What drew you initially to that industry?
I went, as everyone does, to a million weddings when I was in my early 20s. And I felt like every single time I was asked to wear a bridesmaid's dress, the dress was too expensive. I absolutely hated it. And, there's a real disconnect between the person getting married and all the bridesmaids who are still single and want to look hot. And so a friend of mine and I decided we were going to start this bridesmaids dress company, which we named Elizabeth Gregg, which is our two middle names. This business trying to serve the needs of bridesmaids, which is literally the worst business model ever on so many levels. Like they say they're a size 4, but they're really a size 8. The bride wants $1,000 dress. The bridesmaids can afford a $100 dress. But anyway, I started to learn a little bit about the wedding industry. And during that period of time, I was transferred to London with my day job, which was with a soft dollar brokerage firm. I was working in finance. And I was introduced to this woman named Nicole Hindmarch, whose sister many people may be aware of. Her name is Anya Hindmarch. She's a big handbag designer in London. But Nicole had this really interesting wedding registry concept. I went to pitch her on putting bridesmaids' dresses in her store. She looked at me and said, the Brits don't use bridesmaids, in her, lovely, but at the time kind of snotty way. You Americans use grown-ups, we just use children. But she and I forged a relationship that day. And I said to her, look, your concept's really intriguing. Someday I would love to talk again. And so that's really how it was. The bridesmaids dress business failed. I think we did 30 weddings and I just said, I'm done. This is not for me. It made me really interested in the wedding industry at large.
A little bit later, you worked for Martha Stewart in the early 2000s. This is actually when you sold your company, The Wedding List, to Martha Stewart Living. So what was it like to work for Martha Stewart?
Nicole and I ended up partnering and started The Wedding List together. She had started in London. We brought it to the States. And it was interesting. It was a moment in time where it was that first wave of entrepreneurism that was kind of, I was saying to my kids last night, I thought I was super cool. I think I kind of was cool at the time. I was in my 20s. Entrepreneurs were a new kind of thing. They weren't. Obviously, this entire country's been built on entrepreneurism, but they were having a moment. And we had caught the attention of both Ralph Lauren and Martha Stewart. They both were intrigued by our concept, which was more, I mean, it's so crazy to say today. It absolutely dates me, but it was the first multi-channel retail business that was focused on wedding registry and trying to make it, you know, a really fun process for the bride and groom and a really easy process for people purchasing. Fast forward, Martha decides, kind of wins the battle. Ralph Lauren backs out. I sell to Martha. And where do you want me to begin? I mean, honestly, like, look, I can tell you I learned a lot from Martha. I certainly learned how not to lead. Yeah. She is truly one of the most creative geniuses in the world. And she was definitively one of the most difficult women for him to work. And I unfortunately had the challenge of reporting into Martha and into Sharon Patrick, who was the COO at the time for Martha Stewart Living, Omni Media. And they didn't agree on anything. So I was always caught in the crossfires. And, you know, working for Martha was, you know, you would have tours of the building and they'd tell you, you need to drink V8 juice because Martha likes V8 juice. There was certain things in the buildings, pretzel rods, Diet Coke, oatmeal, and V8 juice in all the kitchens. And you were told that's what you were supposed to drink. And I remember thinking that was really crazy.
I read that she also used to call you every Friday at 6:01 p.m. to just make sure that you were in the office. Is that true?
I don't know if it was like every single Friday at 6:01, but basically the second I would get in my car to go out to Long Island or whatever during the summer, she would call. Martha is both a creative genius and impossible to please. For whatever reason, I got under her skin. I think I was one of the few people in her life that worked for her that would just put it right back in her face. So back to the V8 juice, I was like, you know, I actually like V8 juice, but I'm not going to drink V8 juice because you're telling me to drink. I'm like, do you even drink it? As I'm sitting on her private plane. And it's sort of, I was always back at her face. If she say, who chose that color of blue? Everyone would be cowering around her. And I'd say, you did yesterday in the meeting at 2 p.m. She didn't really like that. So I think I became her passion project to make sure like she knew where I was and what I was doing a lot of the time.
So was there anything specifically, obviously she was a very demanding boss, but was there anything specifically that you did actually take with you that you learned from her in terms of her leadership style?
She was able to take the average middle-class American woman and make her feel like a goddess in her home on a budget. She showed her how to do things on her own. And I really, really loved the way that she focused externally, at least, on powering up women. And that I took with me. I think what I also took with me is you let your team do the work, and then your job as the CEO is to come in and tweak things ever so slightly just to put that icing on the cake. She was not in the weeds on all the day-to-day, but she absolutely had a point of view on everything, and she was incredibly decisive, and I think I did learn that from her. I mean, she's unbelievable. She is truly unbelievable. She just was very difficult to work for. And in fairness to Martha, this is a long time ago, and at that point in time, there were no, what are our optional, things? Why don't you have organic milk in the refrigerator? Sorry, I want to leave. And, I don't want to have a 9 to 5. I mean, that wasn't even a conversation back then. You were in the office from the crack of dawn till the end of the day. And if you needed to stay till 1 a.m. because you were on a shoot, that was life.
I read that in your next job, you were fired by Messenger. So I just need to know the story.
Yeah, I've worked with some unbelievable women. I'm sure there's some women that will say that about me. So subsequent to Martha Stewart selling the company to her, I stayed on for a year as per my contract. The second I could leave, I left and took some time off. And then I was called by someone to start doing consulting in the fashion world. And one of the consulting jobs I was given was at Bergdorf Goodman, working on their whole wedding registry business, which was kind of a mess. And within the whole wedding and baby world of Bergdorf Goodman was Best & Company, and Best & Company was owned by the Hilfigers. At the time, Susie Hilfiger was still married to Tommy. Tommy took a liking to my work, called me and said, would you come in and run Best & Company? We need to make it profitable. He and Susie were estranged at the time and moving towards a divorce. But I came into that business really cocky, honestly, coming out of all that I'd done with Martha Stewart. As I said, I thought I was cool. And maybe I was, but I was also cocky, like unnecessarily cocky. I learned a lot. And I didn't know how to manage Susie as a creative person. So she would do things that I thought were totally off the charts crazy. And they were at times. I was there to turn the company into a profitable business. She was there to spend as much of Tommy's money as she could, as far as I could see, as they were sort of unwinding their marriage. She got fed up with me. So she just decided one day that she was going to fire me, and she sent a messenger. I was in the middle of a meeting with, I think we had about 60 employees in New York City on 25th Street. And someone said, are you Gregg Renfrew? And it's like, I am. and they handed me papers. I mean, it was like, you got to be kidding me. And it basically said, you're out and you're going to be escorted out of the business right there, like right in front of my team. I mean, it was unbelievable. I can laugh about it now. I didn't think it was very funny at the time. But, you know, I think what I learned from that, aside from the fact that these things happen and you have to, you know, drink a lot of wine and then move on, or don't drink wine. But for me, I definitely drank a lot for a few days, is that, you know, again, arrogance has no place in the business world. And I have learned how to deal with creative people because they operate slightly differently than those that are really focused on the numbers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because obviously the corporate world has changed so much over the last few decades. But when you hear a story like that, you just think there is no world in which that would happen today.
Imagine?
Or maybe it does. But with social media, you know, whoever's on the receiving side of getting that messenger is going to be popping on TikTok and talking about it. And then the company is going to be the one that's up in flames, right? So it's just wild when I hear these types of stories. And I just think that would never happen today.
People got away with the craziest shit back in the day.
Let's transition to the world that you're in today, which is the beauty world. So your first company, Beautycounter. I'd love to hear more of the origin story behind this business and the initial business model.
So I'm not a beauty insider. I still really feel like I don't work in the beauty industry, although I know that sounds crazy because I've been at beauty now for the better part of 15 years. But I am not a beauty insider. And I didn't come from a place of being in love with beauty products either. I started this whole journey right around when I got fired because my friend Leela told me to watch this film called An Inconvenient Truth. This was 2006. And she had watched it and become immediately impassioned for the environmental health movement and said, Gregg, you're super outspoken. You're connected. I want you to watch this film. Like, this is important. So I went and watched the film and realized that I, as a consumer and as a human being, was doing things that were detrimental to the earth, not recycling, using, driving a big car, whatever it was. And so subsequent to that, I started, making changes in my life to try to, recycle more. On top of that, I watched so many of my friends get sick. I had friends in their 20s and their 30s being diagnosed with different types of cancer. I had so many friends struggling with fertility issues. My best friend could never, bring a baby into the world like on her own terms. She finally was able to have a biological daughter through a surrogate, but it was just an awful process. And then I had so many friends giving birth to kids with serious health issues. And these are health issues that I hadn't grown up with. So I started to wonder what was going so terribly awry with the health of the earth and human health. And the one thing that I came to realize is there are all these chemicals in commerce and in the world that were toxic. And with that in mind, I started making all these changes in my life, switched from plastic to glass, took my shoes off at the door when I could. Now I fight with my kids incessantly about stuff like that. But I really was trying to remove any chemicals of concern that I could from my life to the best of my abilities. Fast forward, like when I came into the area of skincare and color cosmetic and personal care products, and I knew that there were these chemicals that were being used that were linked to health issues, I couldn't find anything I wanted to use. I could find all of the incumbent brands that we've all grown up with, the big conglomerates that, every brand that everyone's known and loved. And they were on trend, they were aspirational, highly effective, looked cool, but they were filled with chemicals of concern linked to reproductive toxicity and cancer, et cetera. And again, not all of them. I'm not like a fear monger, but there are for sure chemicals that you don't want on your or in your body that are in personal care products. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there were all these eco-earthy ones. And I thought, well, that's not me either. And I don't want products that separate, that are packaged in an ugly way. So for me, the whole reason to start Beautycounter was twofold. One, I really wanted to challenge the industry to say, we can do better. And I'm going to hold everyone accountable for doing better by creating and igniting a movement, which we coined the phrase clean. I mean, we created clean in our offices on Berkeley Street in Santa Monica. And we led that movement because I really felt that you should be able to have products you love. They make you feel good, sexy, confident, whatever, dry skin, you name it. But I also wanted you to be healthy because I wanted to make sure that we were protecting the health and safety of people. And to the business model part of it, which you asked about, I feel like there's no better way to change the world than lighting the fire under the asses of women. When shit needs to get done, it always is us. We're the ones that care. We have the emotional intelligence. We have the ability, we have the maternal instincts. We have the ability to find common ground. And so the business model I chose was a hybrid of traditional retail and e-commerce with direct sales, because I really wanted to use the power of women's collective voices to challenge the industry, to disrupt the status quo, to fight for more comprehensive legislation. And it was a model that I thought would allow us to scale, to educate, and to amplify really quickly. And it worked really, really well.
How did you go about having this idea to then creating the first product?
I had no idea what I was doing, right? Nothing. I had worked for Xerox. I had worked in finance. I had worked, in fashion a little bit, but not in beauty. So I had a friend who worked at L'Oreal, and I called her and I said, she worked in the shampoo division. And I said, can you educate me a little bit? And then she led me to another friend that was Estee Lauder. And then I just started calling people. And then someone led me to the Environmental Working Group. A friend of mine, Kate here, introduced me to Christy Coleman, who was like the first true leading makeup artist to clean up her kit. And she had lost her dad to Lou Gehrig's disease and really felt that ALS, that it had something to do with the crops and being sprayed in Oklahoma where she had grown up. And so little by little, question after question, meeting after meeting, I started to understand how we were going to do this. It took forever, years. I mean, I started concepting this in late 2010. We didn't go to market until March of 13 because people thought we were crazy. They didn't know how to do it. And, as one of my old partners, Michael, would say, is like, Gregg would go to the fanciest restaurant, order the best chocolate cake, come back to us and say, I want that exact chocolate cake, but you can't use chocolate, eggs, flour, or sugar, but get it done by 6 months from now. And he was like, what are you talking about? But we were determined to prove you could do it with better ingredients.
And so when you found eventually this manufacturing partner for those initial products, what were those conversations like? Because I believe you are the person who coined the term clean beauty, right?
We did. I did. Christy and I were in a meeting. We were talking about green and eco. And I said, look, I want the young woman who's sitting at Vogue magazine right now, smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, who doesn't think about the environment as much as I want the woman who is hugging a tree in, Northern California. We need to make sure that people understand this is not just about the environment. It needs to feel aspirational and chic. The products need to perform, and we need to remove the chemicals of concern. And so clean felt like we could sort of democratize it to some extent. It felt better for us, and we did. So yes, we did create that whole industry.
Because at the time, it wasn't a well-known word. The industry was not where it is today. How difficult was it to get these manufacturers of the initial products to agree with your viewpoint and essentially get the product formulation to the place that it needed to be?
I can be pretty convincing when I'm dealing with people that work with me. I'll be like, you could sell this thinking Titanic. I mean, I grew up in sales. I started in Xerox. When you're super passionate about something and you believe something to be true, which I do think is an entrepreneurial trait. Like entrepreneurs, they're not smarter, they're not better. They just have a vision for what could become. They can see the possibility of something that others can't yet see. Mm-hmm. That to me is like the entrepreneurial thing. It's not something you can learn. You can just envision something that someone else can't quite get there. It's like an interior designer that can look at the bones of a house, and I can't put together a house if my life depended on it, right? I wouldn't be able to look at that and say, this rug with that sofa together will open up this whole room. But with business, I could. And I think that for me, I was able to convince them that there was opportunity. I was able to convince them that there were enough people, and we drafted off the food movement. I could show them that consumers were demanding healthier products in terms of food, and that there was a way to do better to protect the health and safety. And every single person with whom I speak, whether it's you right now, whether it's a contract manufacturing partner, a chemist, a retailer, every single person has been touched directly or indirectly by the health issues we face as a nation today. They won't dispute the fact that there needs to be a better way. Mm-hmm. It was hard to get them excited about it in the beginning, but once they did, they were fully on it with us. They did call us brutal counter. They said, you're brutal, because it would take like 200 submissions to get it right. But now they, of course, love us because they built great businesses off of it, but it took a long time.
I also saw that you testified in a congressional hearing on cosmetic reform in 2019. So what was that process like?
So one of the things I felt was really important when I started Beautycounter and we created this movement is this movement should be for all people. But I also knew that our products were expensive. They weren't physically accessible to a lot of people. They weren't financially accessible to people. And so from day one, we really wanted to advocate for cosmetic reform on both the state and federal level. And we did the same in Canada, because when I started the company, we had not updated a major federal law governing that industry since 1938. And I really want to be clear on this industry, because oftentimes when men listen to this, they'll say, well, I don't wear makeup. I'm like, I'm not talking just about makeup. Talking about sunscreen, bubble bath, deodorant, shaving cream. I mean, you name it. It's anything that's within the world of beauty, personal care, cosmetics, et cetera. And so that law that existed started with the Federal Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act of 1938 with FDR. And we've introduced many tens of thousands of chemicals into commerce since then. So one of the things that we did is use the power of all these incredible women that represented the brand. We had about, in the highest point, about 65,000 women across the United States and Canada that were building business with us, like the OG creators. They were posting on Instagram or wherever they were doing this. We held over 1,000 meetings on the Hill that led ultimately to me having the opportunity to testify in front of Congress, to show Congress, because we did have bipartisan support for change, but how we were going to get there was difficult. And I was able to say we are a for-profit, successful company to appease the right side to say, listen, you can build a viable for-profit company that does better, but also to show both sides that this change needs to happen and how can we find common ground between the two parties to do something that is more health protective for all Americans. And we did that. And, ultimately that led to MOCRA being passed, which I don't take credit for the modernization of cosmetics regulation by myself, but we were certainly instrumental in getting that done.
So for any of my listeners who may not be really up to speed on what clean beauty entails, what ingredients are banned versus what should be allowed, can you share any surprises that just your average person would find really interesting about these ingredients that are not on the clean list that are used in anything from skincare to beauty products?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, we're back to the wild, wild west. So we did a good job, but what does clean mean today? I mean, there is absolutely no definitive standard for clean. And when I was deciding whether or not to come back into the industry and launch Counter, I really felt and feel that we need one clean. When I first came in, I was sort of up against the incumbents, all the large conglomerates who had been making these products. And I say up against because, look, I understand there's lots of nuance to this. People have been doing things for decades. But now the retailers, in a very self-serving way, have created all of their own standards for clean. Mm-hmm. So if you go to Walmart or Target or Ulta or Sephora, Credo, whatever, everyone has a different standard. So first and foremost, you should know as a consumer that if it says clean, it doesn't mean anything. Clean is a totally meaningless, unregulated term. Now, certain of the companies that are claiming to be clean are really trying to walk the walk and doing their best. Others are full of shit. And I think that people should know that first and foremost. I think in terms of certain chemicals that are often used, I always say if you do one thing as an average consumer is shop fragrance free, because many of the most offensive chemicals, the endocrine disrupting chemicals like phthalates that bind that scent to your skin, which is also like that new car smell. I mean, they're used in electronics, they're everywhere. But they so closely mimic your endocrine system that the body doesn't know to reject them. And fragrance, well, they're all over that. So I always tell people, if you can, shop fragrance free. If you're absolutely madly in love with your fragrance, try to buy a clean line, like Michelle Pfeiffer's line, Henry Rose, or there are some that are doing better. Put it on your clothing, not on your skin. But that's one example of something, all those spray sunscreens that are clear, like oxybenzone and avobenzo, they're killing the coral reefs and they're horrible for you. There are just a lot of things that you can look for. One of the things we did well with the old company was we created something called the Never List. We still, I think, have it on the Counter website, but it's a list of ingredients we choose not to formulate with. Clean goes well beyond that. It's not just about what you don't put in, it's what you do put in. It's about, are ingredients ethically or responsibly sourced? Is a woman being paid a fair wage? Is she's safe in the field? I mean, like any industry, there's a lot of scary stories out there, So is the palm oil responsibly sourced, or are we burning down rainforests? I mean, these are things that consumers just don't know. We tend to turn a blind eye, but also because the retailers and everyone else are telling you, oh, this is all safe, but it's just not. Mm-hmm. So I'm not here to scare. I always try to say that knowledge is power, and hopefully you can make informed choices if you know what to look for.
Because you're stating that the word clean is basically meaningless now, would Counter ever come up with a new version of clean or a new word that that fits the standards that you're talking about?
We haven't really been talking about a new word, but it's a good idea. So maybe I'll steal your idea and take it and make some money off of it someday. I think that what I think that Counter will do is work to try to create one clean standard. I think that's an opportunity that we have. And I think we have the right to do that work, because I do think within the beauty industry, consumers don't necessarily know that. But if you were to speak to most of the people within the industry, they would say, it's not that no one was doing cleaner products or earth-friendly products before. We commercialized it, we led it, and we set the standards. And people respected us for that. Every single large conglomerate has applauded our efforts and respected the work that we did and showed a path forward. I think now what I would love to do is set a definitive standard to the best of our abilities that makes sense, that everyone can understand. I don't know if the word democratize is right, but let's set a standard that all consumers can understand. It may not be exactly my perfect standard, but at least everyone knows we're on one playing field. And then challenge the brands that aren't doing it to step up, because I think they can, and challenge the retailers, most importantly, to stop creating chaos where chaos is unnecessary. That's an opportunity I see today for us. And that, to me, when I think about advocacy in today's world, yes, of course, we'll continue to fight on the state and federal level, but let's go use business and that as the vehicle for change right now to protect consumers.
When you're saying retailers, so this means, and I'm going to use an example, a Sephora and Ulta, if they have a section of their e-com, their website that says clean beauty favorites, I'm making this up, right? Are you saying that labeling of clean beauty is wrong because they may choose brands or products that don't fit into what you believe is clean?
Well, what I believe is clean is a higher standard that they probably won't
so
decide to reach. What I'm saying is that if you go to Target, they define clean in one way. If you go to Ulta, they've had this clean conscious clean program. Sephora has Sephora Clean by Sephora. None of those standards are the same. So if I shop Sephora and I shop Ulta in the same day, the standards are different. That's, to me, unacceptable. I was on a focus group call the other day, and a young woman from Boston said to me, I take an app with me to shop in Ulta Sephora to see within the clean section if the product is actually clean. I think that we would benefit from everyone agreeing that, okay, this is the standard that consumers can stand by. And so if someone's putting the word clean on the label and they're inside of Sephora Clean or Ulta or Target or Walmart or whichever one, Bloomingdale's, Credo. I mean, Credo really, sets standards that everyone knows what it means. I think that would be helpful to consumers.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And I also believe that in business in general, we need to stop focusing so much on the competition. Build the brand that you have on the merits of your own, like what your brand attributes that are appealing to consumers. And I think for multi-branded retailers, that's not their edge. So let's all agree on one standard and stick with it. That I would love to see happen.
Okay.
Wish me luck. Wish me luck.
Okay. So now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about a little bit more about the business model. I want to talk about this because from everything that I've read, and there's been a ton of press about Beautycounter.
Yes, there
I feel like there may be a little bit of a misunderstanding that I want to clear up here. First things first, why did you believe that the community-based structure that you chose was the right structure for Beautycounter? Before, you had said that you felt like women were the people to really share the message and all of the reasons why they are the right people to do it. But beyond that, from like a financial standpoint, was there anything else that led you to that decision?
There were a couple of things that I felt were opportunities. So when I was told about direct sales, my immediate answer was, hell no. Because my opinion of that world was a bunch of slick companies overpromising and underdelivering. And that's true. Now, of course, that's also true in finance, and everyone seems to forgive it in the financial markets. But there are a lot of companies out there. They're out there today. I look at companies today that I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we don't use water. We only use like olives from, whatever. It's like, come on, guys, this is not for real. But I think that at the end of the day, I felt first and foremost, we needed to educate people, because at the time that I started Beautycounter, less than 10% of Americans had any idea that there were chemicals of concern in their products. We were educators first. And I thought women like to share stories and they want to tell each other important information. It's like if someone has a baby, they're like, what formula do you use? We're information sharers. So I think that I thought that was interesting. Number two, e-commerce was there. But it wasn't at a stage where people were necessarily comfortable of choosing, a tinted moisturizer or a scent. What was the scent profile? We've come a long way, but remember, this is 2010. So I had a conversation with Bill Guthrie from Guthrie Renker, who had started all those infomercials, started Proactive. And he was saying, e-commerce is really great in beauty for replenishment, but not great for initial purchasing. This is, again, long time ago. We've come a long way. And then the other thing is that I wanted to create an underground movement, because Beautycounter was the intended double entendre of going counter to the beauty industry. And I wanted to sneak up on everyone. And all of the shelves were controlled by Revlon and Estee Lauder and everyone else, we weren't going to get on those shelves, right? They were printing money for these retailers. No one's going to let us there. And by the way, the retailers, like the primary distribution channel at the time, other than Sephora, really was the department stores. And they were falling apart, and they've fallen apart. And so I knew that distribution channel was waning. I was watching the emergence of these sort of creators and micro influencers. And I thought, this is compelling, but we need to do it differently than it's been done before.
The New York Times called Beautycounter an MLM.
Yes.
What's your thought on that?
So it's funny because we cannot get rid of that nomenclature or that stigma. I would have said to you, if you interviewed me 5 years ago, I would have said, we are a direct-to-consumer brand powered by people, making our products available to our clients on our e-commerce platform, through our partnership with Ulta, through Goop, through a community of independent consultants, and our own stores. We had stores in LA and New York, whatever. That to me is not an MLM. What we did have that came from the MLM business is that we allowed women to build teams. And about 5% of women actually built a team. And a team could be like they asked their friend to join them and they were paid a small percentage on what that friend sold. And that's what MLMs allow people to do. But that's no different than the corporate world. CEO makes more money than the entry-level position. People get paid on team sales all over the place. I think the stigma came for them in these companies of the past that overpromised and underdelivered. I actually think many of the aspects of MLM are positive. They're not predatory in the way that they're described by Bill Ackman and whatever in most cases. Yeah, there's some bad eggs, but I think I liked certain attributes of it because what the teams did do is they built community. What we didn't allow for also is that you couldn't buy a bunch of product and sell it out of your garage. Every single transaction came through Beautycounter.com. So we used our teams of women or our individual women, because 95% of them were working individually, to acquire new customers, to amplify our efforts, and to educate the consumer. So yes, we will always be called MLM because no one ever took the time to really break down the business and understand that we were a multi-channel retail business, that we're allowing our customer to shop as they wished, and that there is something really powerful about a personal connection, woman to woman, when you're talking about skincare, color, cosmetics, and protecting your health. And I applaud those women. And this is something that I became unbelievably passionate about. And it makes me really angry when people look down upon women who are trying to help make ends meet. It is hard to be a woman who has a family, keeping your husband or your partner happy, your children happy, having time for yourself, helping contribute earnings while there's a lot of pressure on us as women. So most of these women had suffered from health issues, had kids that were sick. We're trying to send them to summer camp, afford private school. We should be like, they're the most kick-ass women in the world. They are like the OG creators, but somehow because of this MLM stigma, it's considered to be not cool. And I don't like that about that. It really bothers me because I think they were great women. And by the way, they were oftentimes the exact same women that the other brands were paying as influencers. They just didn't realize it. I think as women, we should power each other up. And if someone is choosing to try to spend more time with their children, but also earn some income, hallelujah. Let her make back to school shopping comfortable and accessible and not a stressful thing, or holidays,
Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I could talk about for hours, as you can imagine.
Yeah. The MLM piece of it, I'd say from a reputational standpoint, I agree with you that women now, it is actually, I'd say, on the opposite side of the spectrum when you think of all of the ways that women can have these portfolio careers and do these things where they have multiple streams of income across different channels, right? If you look at what's happening in the TikTok shop space, and it's huge in beauty, it's not frowned upon at all for a woman to say, hey, shop this. And obviously they're getting paid to push product. And if you look at the numbers, especially in the beauty space, it's wild how well that's working. But I think really from my POV, and you know much more about the space than I do, it really seems like the crux of the reputational issue is that more team element. Because when a woman's doing that solo, independently, there is no shame in the game and people will clap and snap and applaud. It's the second where, ironically, that person becomes, more entrepreneurial in building a team, that it's like, oh, that's actually not good. Yeah. So it's so interesting. And you do have companies, to be fair, who have done the MLM route, who have, for many different reasons, exploded. They're no longer here today.
Yeah, for sure,
and they were bad actors.
And there's still some out there right now. Yeah. But they're also like Bernie Madoff and the whole pyramid scheme. And what MLMs are not, more times than not, sometimes they are. They're not pyramid schemes. Like if you represented Beautycounter, you were paid on the sale of a product, period, full stop. That's it. You got a percentage of commission, just like if I sold a house or I sold insurance or anything else. I think that Avon, who started this whole world, right? They gave women a right to earn an independent income before they were even able to vote. And let's be real, like right now, today in 2026, life is incredibly expensive. Period, full stop. Most Americans are struggling to make ends meet. So if we can afford women an opportunity to monetize their clothing habits, their beauty care, whatever, that's fantastic. The team element gives people pause, but it is actually not dissimilar to a corporate structure. The only difference is that there was a lack of regulation. So certain bad eggs, and rightly so, gave the industry a bad reputation. I've chosen in Counter not to allow for people to build teams. What I do believe people have missed in the early stages of Counter, and we're working on this because it's been a season of learning, is that the community aspect for women is powerful. They learn from one another. They feel lonely oftentimes. They need to get out of their homes. They need something that intellectually stimulate them. And it's fun to do that with friends. And so we've been really working on how can you build community without building teams? Because I think that did become very transactional at times. So I've seen all sides of it. But I will say the thing that I fell most in love with building Beautycounter was watching women transform. And I don't want to over-index on that word because it can be overdone. But when you give women, and I had this conversation with Tory Burch not that long ago, when you give women an opportunity to take action on an issue that matters and earn a little bit of income, it has a ripple effect in her life and her family. I had so many husbands say, thank you for giving me my wife back. She's got her passion. She's excited again. She's using her brain in a way that feels good. She's made some new friends. Her kids are proud of her because she's going on business trips. Like that is powerful. And we should do that for all women.
100%. And last thing on this, I was on Instagram the other day and I got this, I don't even know. It was some kind of satire video of this woman who was doing this spoof of someone who was clearly part of an MLM. And she's using these words around, I'm empowering my family and blah, blah, blah. A lot of the things that you're saying, but she's saying it in a more satirical way. And when I was watching it, I couldn't help but think, is part of the reason why we're getting so much, we have gotten so much backlash on this model because it's women who are doing
100%,
it.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. This happens all the time with men. Believe me, I went into some of the meetings with some of these women when the early stages, and they'd be like, like this sort of like close your eyes. This is what people hate about MLMs, right? It's like close your eyes, see yourself floating on a yacht, like whatever. And like, that's bullshit. That's not going to happen. You're not going to be floating on a yacht. Like, you're not going to make $20 million off of this, right? You're probably going to make like $200 a month. Yeah. But you might be able to say to your husband, actually, let me buy dinner tonight, or we can't afford summer camp, or I did buy that Louis Vuitton handbag, damn it, and I made it with my own money. It gives you power. I always say to women of all ages, stay in the game. Do not leave the workforce. That doesn't mean that you have to work full time, but do something to stay in the game. Because by the time your kids are like 3 or 4, they have their own lives. Your husband's out there doing. It's nice to have something that's yours that allows you to say, we bought that house together. We're doing this, It's empowering. And that is empowering. And I do think it creates a more equal balance in partnerships, whether that's a same-sex marriage or husband and wife or whatever. I think it's important to have both people earning something, even if it's just a small amount. It gives you confidence. But yes, that dream, like my dream team and blah, blah, blah. Yes. I literally was like, like I wanted to barf half the time. And, I died a small death a few times. And I would say, guys, this is not how we're going to talk about this business. Don't stalk people in the hallways, please.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but I want to talk about the private equity of it all. You sold Beautycounter to private equity, the Carlyle Group, in 2021 for $1 billion. At that point in time, how did you come to the decision that that was the right moment?
2 years prior, we had been approached by one of the large strategics who I really love, and they tried to buy the company and had made, I think they offered like north of $700 million to the business. And I don't know why. I always equate business and dating and relationships. It's a way I feel like it's, but I literally turned to them and I was like, thank you so much. Like, you're kind of like the guy that I might want to marry, but I'm not ready to get married. And the ring, like, it's not exactly what I want. They're all like buttoned up and like perfectly coiffed. They looked at me like, you're crazy. But I just wasn't really ready to sell. But what happened though, is because my early stage investors who had been with me for 6-7 years already saw like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And by the way, I want to be really clear about investing, because this is one of the things that also blew up when Beautycounter went out of business. Everyone was really angry that we sold. And there's always this narrative that like entrepreneurs sell and shame on them. What people forget, and I will defend all of these entrepreneurs, is that building businesses today requires a significant amount of capital. It's not like it was 20 years ago where you opened a store, then you launched a website. Consumers want it all, and they want it all now. They want you to be incredibly proficient on social media. They want you to have freestanding stores. They want you to have incredible product. They want you to have this and that, customer support, you name it, free shipping, blah, 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 blah. All of that requires capital. Most people don't have millions of dollars sitting in the bank to just start companies with. And so what do? They go raise venture and private equity capital. And that capital has been borrowed to some extent from investors, other investors. And so those funds need to provide a return on the capital that they manage, right? This is a process that I think you could do a whole podcast on unbundling how this all works. So my investors came in early on, took a chance on me. They were at the end of almost a 7-year cycle when we got that offer. They wanted me to sell because they would have been able to turn to their investors and say, we got a 10x on this investment. That's a really great amount of money. I chose not to do it because actually the deal was really good for me, but it wasn't good for the other associates. And I was trying to think about everyone. 2020 happens. We're like, we're going to go back out and start this again. COVID hits. Fast forward, I read Bob Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime. Really important. It was like Inconvenient Truth and Bob Iger's book, Ride of a Lifetime. He was the CEO of Disney. He was talking about having control of your destiny, talking about what he did when he came into Disney. And I was like, wait, we need a financial sponsor. I want to be the next generation leader in beauty. I want to find a financial sponsor. I want to sell to a private equity firm so I can IPO this company. I want to be one of the few women that will IPO a company that they started. That was my goal. Carlyle, among others, was one of the most reputable private equity firms in the world. And Jay Salmons, the man that was leading it at the time, he and I had built a relationship over the years, and he believed in what I was doing. And contrary to popular belief, he believed in the business model. He believed in the women, and he knew that people were seeking alternative channels. So it seemed like a match made in heaven at the time that I sold the company. And I was excited about it. My investors were thrilled. By the way, boards make the decision, not the entrepreneur by herself or himself. You have no choice but to sell at some point if you take in significant amounts of other people's money. And I'd raised $80 million. So we were going to sell at some point, and that's life.
I think what you mentioned in part of having the investors that at that point had been in for 6-7 years, as you said, who feel as if their job and their incentives are fundamentally, of course, they're supporting you, but they're entirely aligned with yours, right? And I think that's where the consumer, because right now I talk a lot about businesses that merge and are acquired, a lot of them by private equity. And private equity is often villainized for many reasons, which I agree with you. Some fair reasons. Could be its own podcast. But I think what is really important for the consumer to understand are the financial levers that go into place to have a company that is as big as Beautycounter was when you guys sold. And the fact that you have a board, it's you, I would imagine you have
7 other people or 8 other people on my board at the time.
So ultimately, if those 6-7 other people are saying, we've gotten this offer that's been presented to us, even if you wanted to hold out and say, no, not yet, or let's grow a little bit more and then try and sell, there's only so much. I mean, I would imagine, though, obviously for every single company, this is a little bit different. But did you have at that point yourself, were you a majority owner?
No, not even close. I own a small, tiny bit of the business. And they had the right to force a sale after 7 years. And again, look, I've learned a lot through all of these, my whole life, of all the mistakes I've made, because I've made way more mistakes than I've had successes. And people think that you're super successful. They forget all the times you fell flat on your face and just picked yourself up over and over again, and you learn from those mistakes. But I didn't really understand all of that as well as I do today. And so if you take in outside capital, which almost every entrepreneur does, unless they start some tiny business, that capital has a time limit on it. And at that point in time, because private equity and venture capital have funds and they have expiration dates and their investors expecting return after so many years, you're going to have to do something. And this is where I get really defensive for myself, way more importantly for other entrepreneurs. When I see consumers bash them for selling their businesses, they don't understand that the very product that you've enjoyed was made possible in part due to the fact that someone took a chance on that entrepreneur and backed them financially. And someone took a chance on those people and backed them financially. You can bash private equity all day long in that what I always say to all of these guys is there's a world that exists in a spreadsheet, but that's not the real world. They need to live in the real world. The real world is there was no fire in Los Angeles last year. That wasn't on a spreadsheet. There wasn't anyone that dropped my counter inventory for holiday packaging for 2025 a couple months ago into the water in the Long Beach thing that dropped off the ship. Someone's, associate didn't break up with their girlfriend and have a meltdown for 5 days and doesn't show up to work. Someone's aunt didn't get sick and they have to take care of them and take a leave of absence. Those are all the things that happen in the real world that the private equity firm in general or venture firm fails to understand because they're not operators of business. I would challenge all of them to go run a company for a year and then come back and talk to the entrepreneurs about why they missed 1 point of margin or why the sales were off by 5%. And certainly for me, after I sold Beautycounter, it was the first summer after the pandemic hit. And they panicked because our sales were like up and down because what happened? Everyone stopped buying beauty products and they started buying clothing and spending money on travel because they've been cooped up for all this time inside. And all of a sudden they're like, I want to go buy that new pair of jeans. And for many people, the choice of buying a nice pair of jeans or an expensive serum is a choice. You don't get to do both. So they redirected their spend and our business was shaky that summer. And they made the decision that I needed to be fired as a result of it.
Right after the acquisition happened, I read that the sellers started to leave and you had mentioned the sales falling. So the sellers leaving, was that a result of, would you say, the times? Because it was just a lot harder to sell makeup at that stage?
When a company gets sold, people get nervous. What does this mean for me? Am I going to be made redundant? Am I going to be fired because they think that there's a less expensive CFO? And so, sellers are no different. They had built businesses with us, certainly the leaders, and they were nervous because they'd heard bad stories about private equity before. I mean, they were looking up things that I'd never even heard of. I was like, what? I've never even heard of that company, but okay. So I think that people were on edge. On top of that, we were coming out of COVID where people hadn't been able to meet up in real life. And I do think the power of community is important. And it's great to have a digital community, but IRL meetups with brands, they're also really, really important. And so we kind of lost touch because we hadn't seen each other. We sell the company. The second variant comes through that, I don't remember what it was called anymore, but the Omicron variant. So we couldn't see each other again. So things started to get a little bit shaky. But then they decided to make a compensation plan adjustment, and that's when people left. And it was something that we had contemplated in advance of selling, but it was under the new CEO's leadership, carried out in a way that I would never have done. Because you can make adjustments to people's compensation in direct sales or in any business, but you need to do it with warning and show them a path on how they can rebuild and do it with respect. And it just went terribly awry.
And so, as you said, you were asked to step out of the CEO role. Walk me through the day that you found out that you were leaving that role.
I'd been in Las Vegas for some reason with my husband going to see a concert. And we were flying, it was like a weekend, and we were flying to go to visit my daughter who was in boarding school at the time. And I got the call. And I think the statement was like, I'm just going to lay the elephant on the table. Like, you're not capable of running the company. This was October. I'd sold in May. So it was like 4 months later. I built the company from scratch straight up for 8.5 years. So it was a shocking statement to me. I mean, I think I went through all the feels. I cried, I yelled, I screamed, whatever. I drove up for a couple of hours. But, it was, wow. I thought you guys said like I was the person that was going to be the next most amazing CEO ever. And now I'm out. And of course it was said, well, we'll do this in partnership with you and we'll find someone that complements you. And we don't want you to leave the business. We want you to be sort of running the brand in this community of women. But, the community of women they were the brand. They were the revenue engine. So to say that there's a new CEO, but I'm in charge of that, like that's whatever. But, I went along with it because I was committed to our mission. I was committed to these women. I was committed to the financial outcomes for everyone. So, I went along with it and tried, in earnest, we tried to find a CEO with whom I could work. But I was devastated.
What was harder for you, being removed as CEO or watching the company fail without you at the helm?
I feel like it's like behind door number one, you have an asshole brought in a CEO who's going to run your company into the ground, or you can just be out in the streets. I mean, for me, it was definitively watching this man come in who had absolutely no desire to partner with me in any way, did not respect any of my or others' institutional knowledge, led from an arrogant place, and watching the business fall apart under his leadership and not being able to do anything about it. It's like if you're watching through a window, something about to happen, you can see it happen, like there's about to be an accident. You're like, that's how I felt. And it was incredibly frustrating to me. Ego-wise, of course, it's incredibly humbling to be removed as CEO. Maybe at the moment in time, I wasn't the best CEO. Maybe I wasn't. Mm-hmm. But that CEO that came in and the way he treated me and everyone else and the way he led the business, that turned it from a brand that was sold for $1 billion to a business that was doing 50% in less than 2 years, like that was really hard to watch.
That's a pretty staggering decline in a really short period of time.
It goes back to what I said to you earlier, which is arrogance has no place in the business world. And if there is one thing I'm not today, it's arrogant. He was incredibly arrogant, not just towards me, towards the private equity firm, towards everyone. He thought he knew better. He thought he could take old school beauty playbook tactics and apply them to the industry disruptor. And he patronized me and everyone around us, and he made a series of poor decisions that led to the demise of Beautycounter.
The roller coaster continues because eventually you were actually brought back in as CEO, but in your words, it was just too late at that point. The damage had already been done. What was your perspective? What were you thinking when you stepped back into that role, having seen everything that had just happened under the previous CEO's leadership?
When they called me to come back in, I said no. You know, it's like, have you ever been through a bad breakup where you're like totally letting your heart, like your heart gets ripped out and you finally feel like you can stand on your own 2 feet and face another day? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then the guy comes back to you and he's like, I still love you. Like, I miss you. Like, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. And you're like, you've got to be kidding me. And your immediate reaction is like, oh my God, I'm so glad he loves me still. But like, hell no. Like, no, I've just like cried over you for 2 years and now you want me back? That's exactly how I felt, which is just like, you've got to be kidding me. Now you want me back? But then, of course, they were very convincing. I still owned, because I had to roll a bunch of equity in the company. I had all these women. There were at the time about 40,000 women selling the product. I felt like I owed it to them. They'd been through hell. I felt like there was no reason for the pioneer and igniter of the clean beauty movement to be gone. And so, you know, I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. My daughter, Georgie, was really the one that convinced me. All my kids, but my daughter, Georgie, I can barely talk about it still today because we were on vacation. It was spring break and when I made the decision and to do all this. And it was just like, Mom, you can't let this fail. You've worked so hard. So I came back in as CEO, but you know, 6 weeks later, they were just like, they, in fairness to Carlisle, they could see what I emotionally just couldn't go there, which is that the business was broken and it was just too late. And they made the decision to no longer fund the business. So it was a hard decision to come in. It was even harder to hear that we weren't going to fund it because I had 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, like, even Bob Iger couldn't have turned it around in 6 weeks. Like, no CEO could have turned this around in 6 weeks. But they probably saw what I couldn't see, which was just was a little too late.
It just goes to show there's the whole glass cliff phenomenon. It's different in your case because you literally created the company to begin with, but women are put into these situations to lead companies when it is the final hour and the company's already been through so much value loss, right? And in your case, 6 weeks is laughable. You can't do anything in 6 weeks when it comes to turning the trajectory of a company around. So the company does go through foreclosure, but in April 2024, I feel like this, I swear, it's like a roller coaster that is, we've had so many ups and downs already. Movie, yeah. There better be a Netflix movie coming out about you soon. But you buy the company out of foreclosure. What made you decide to do that at that point in time?
I literally just couldn't let it die. You know, we had all worked so hard for so long. We created something that was truly extraordinary. You know, I remember my son, like, trying to sell the fragrance. It's so funny. My 18-year-old son, he was, I guess, like 16 at the time. You know, the only thing he's ever posted is like a Patriots win or his friends' lacrosse things or whatever. But he was posting about the Beautycounter fragrance online, trying to get his friends and his friends' moms to sell. Barely talk about it. But anyway, I think that it was like I owed it to all the people that had taken a chance on me. I owed it to my family who had sacrificed so much in the name of building that business. I owed it to myself to see it through. I felt like there was unfinished work to be done. And I wanted to challenge myself to see, can I do it again? I knew it needed to be different. And honestly, when I bought the company, I didn't think I was going to have to shut it down. I bought it thinking I could turn this around. But like within literally 24 hours, I was like, there is no way. We just didn't have the capital. I mean, there was just not the money. And so that was a really difficult decision. But I just think I felt like there was so much unfinished business, so much more work to be done to protect people, so much more opportunity for women. And I don't know. I mean, it was a really hard decision. I had to take a huge amount of my savings. We made the decision in less than 48 hours. I had to rally some of my old investors and a new one together to wire money in with no paperwork. I mean, it was it was crazy. And then I did it. And then I literally had a full blown anxiety attack, like sobbing, like, oh my God, what have I done? Because it was really scary, honestly.
Yeah. It sounds like in many ways, because you had to get the capital together so quickly, a lot of what you were running off of was this sense of intuition and adrenaline. And you knew that you couldn't let it die. But at the same time, for you to pull off the actual action of buying it back out of foreclosure, that's no small feat. And that requires a ton of people who also believe in you and are willing to put more money behind you. Again, I don't know if they were new, it was new capital,
they were almost
or
all old investors. We had one new investor, and they had all done well in the previous iteration of Beautycounter. But yeah, I mean, I literally just picked up the phone, and actually one of my old TPG investors called me. I hadn't called him yet. And he said, I can't believe you didn't call me. Like, why wasn't I your first call? He was like the man that made me the version of the CEO I am today. Guy Mike Stone, and just was, he was so hard on me when I was growing up the company, and he kept, saying you're a founder CEO. And honestly, the best compliment of my life is when he's like, you're a formidable CEO. You can go up against the best CEOs today. But we worked together for a long time, and he helped me become better and better and better. And that phone call meant the world to me when he called me and said, I want in. It was kind of crazy. But we did it.
After you bought it back, you shut the company down for what I read, 13 months, a little over a year. So what did you do during that time?
Again, I'd never been involved in any of these types of things. I knew nothing about bankruptcy. Did you know you have to have a lot of money to file for bankruptcy? So you can't file for bankruptcy. So you have to go into foreclosure. So there were all these things that I didn't know that I was learning. And so the first thing I had to do was I had to fire almost all the associates of the company. There was no money, no severance, no health insurance. That's something that I've been publicly scathed for. But that's one of those things where it was the hardest conversation. Of course, you've got your legal team saying you can only say these things, you stick with the script. And that was just the most heartbreaking thing ever, because they didn't deserve that. Mm-hmm. But there was literally no money. And so I had to shut that down. I had to go then pick up the phone and call every single contract manufacturer, every single supplier. I never wanted to ask to have conversations, because there was an inordinate amount of debt on the old business that we didn't carry over because we acquired the assets. When people say you acquire the assets, yes, you do acquire the assets. You don't take on the debt. But the reality of the situation is, if you want to move forward at any point in time, you're going to have to negotiate with some of these people that you want to work with, because they're losing their shirts. So I had about 500 conversations saying, this is going to be we're in a shit sandwich. This is a difficult conversation. I'm going to have to give you money I don't have. You're going to have to lose a whole bunch of money because of the past. I didn't do this to you. You didn't do this to me. So here we are. Mm-hmm. Here's what I want to do with this new company. I'm asking you to take a chance on me again. If you don't want to understand, but this is how much I can afford to pay you. 10 cents on the dollar, whatever. And that took months. I had no idea what I was doing. I sat down there when I said I had a nervous breakdown or an anxiety attack. I had no plan. This was not part of my plan. I made this decision so quickly. So I afforded myself that summer of 2024 to just kind of think, what am I going to do? What does this new company need to look like? I knew it needed to be reimagined. There was no way I could come back in as the same brand with the same model, with the same products. The world had changed since I started that old company. What was innovative once was no longer. So I took some time to reimagine it. And then I had a very small skeleton team that took a chance on me, mostly my old team. And they said, let's give it a shot. And we started working our butts off for 13 months to be able to do a soft launch in June of this year.
Wow.
June of 2025.
Was there any point in time where you thought about giving up?
Yeah. I mean, there were class action lawsuits that followed me from the old company that started going after me as opposed to the company, because there was no money. And that scared me to death. And I was like, look, I wasn't even at the company. I had nothing to do with this. There were so many things that were going on that I thought, why am I doing this? This is crazy. But at the same time, I was loving working with my old team. I believe in our mission of making the world healthier and safer. I believe in powering up women. I believe in business and commerce as the way to create significant impact in the world. And I felt like I had more work to do. So yeah, I mean, there are half the days I'm like, what? I'm not totally insane for doing this. People think I'm crazy. I am crazy. I'm literally crazy. It's like Steve Jobs talks about the crazy ones. I'm one of them. But I also really believe in what we're doing, and I'm proud of what we're doing. And I don't know what success will look like this time around, but I really wanted to give it another shot. I thought we had a right to live to see another day.
There's a meme that has gone viral on social media, and it's Angelina Jolie is the person who's behind it. But there's a quote on there that says, "I will succeed because I am literally insane."
Well, she is. No, I am literally insane. Like, I drive people crazy. Like, it's funny because, I always have to say to the team, and I've grown up a lot and I've been humbled. And, I was like, look, I'm still crazy. Like, but the crazy side of me is the good side of me. The crazy side of me is the one that can see that there is a future for this company, that there are things that can be done differently, that we can win again, and we can go back in on offense and create new standards and create one clean. And that's the side of me that I love. The side of me that I don't love is, there are a million things I hate about myself, including the fact that I'm still terrible with numbers, and I still sometimes, get too emotional. I talk too fast. There are a million things I do wrong, but I do think that the crazy is what entrepreneurs have. It's what makes actors great, and it's what makes business people great. It's the crazy side.
And so now that you have successfully bought back the company, and I've talked to a bunch of founders who have had very different journeys, but the similarity is that they've been these boomerang founders. Mm-hmm. There's tons, but Ty Haney, who was at Outdoor Voices.
She and I have been going back and forth on social media.
She's fantastic. Exactly. Jacqueline Johnson, who did the Create and Cultivate thing. There's so many, but so many. It's actually a tiny world, but people have been on this podcast.
So many women.
Yes, so many women.
So many women.
It's always the women, right?
It is always the women. It's not always women, but it's oftentimes women.
Yes. What advice would you give to someone who is in a position, obviously you're doing this in a very public, large-scale way, but for the small business owner, medium-sized business owner who's in a position where, for whatever reason, they built a company, they sold it, they have the opportunity to get back in, what would your advice be?
If the question is to get back in your old company without the control, I would say maybe don't do that, because I do think that also founders want some semblance of control because it's their vision. If you have the opportunity to buy back the company, I think you need to trust your gut instincts and understand whether the company is still viable in today's world, and understand that you're going to face, Ty and I are very similar in that we created industries and then all of these competitors kind of came in. And so you have to figure out, well, what is it going to look like today? How do we create a moat around the brand today? How do we do things differently today? And I think that if your gut instinct is telling you that there is opportunity to come back in to serve community, to serve your clients, and to do something distinctive and exciting, then do it. But if you think you're going to go back in with the old business as it was, I might say think twice before you do that.
I want to hear it from you in your words, exactly the way that the model works today for Counter versus we've had lots of this MLM conversation. Yeah. But if someone comes to you and says, I want to get involved in Counter, I love the mission, I heard you on Sammy's podcast, and I want to get involved, what would you describe to them, and how does it work?
Well, first of all, I would tell them to do it because I would say that, again, you have the opportunity to make money and it can have significant social impact. And I think that is why I think it was really powerful for people before. We do not let people build teams. So you are working as an individual and paid on your individual sales. That said, we are building out and about to unveil something coming up shortly that really speaks to community and the personalization of the selling opportunity. Because what I did learn through Beautycounter is that people join for a whole variety of reasons. But in sales, and I don't care which company you can refer to any company, real estate, insurance, finance, you get paid, purely on what you sell and a percentage of what you sell. But the reality is people are in it some people just love the product. Some people just wanted to go to Washington. Some people just were lonely and wanted to get out of their homes. Some people wanted to go on trips with us. There are a million reasons why people joined the old company, but yet the entire world of selling is based on one thing, one criteria. How much do you sell? You get paid a percentage. And we're looking at personalization opportunities within selling. And so I would say, I think it is a great time to join because we're about to unveil some things. And I think that, in today's world of creators, people are very accustomed to people saying, here I am this morning, and here's what I ate, and here's the link to my greens, and here's the link to my jeans. And so it's a really comfortable situation, but we are different. We still have our store on Nantucket. We will be opening other stores. We're going to be doing pop-ups again, across the country, and probably we'll have some freestanding stores. We won't go back into a multi-branded retailer other than Goop because they've been longstanding partners and they're not Ulta and Sephora. I really want to own that customer experience. But I think it's a great time to join us because we've really got some incredible new products and some of the old favorites. And we've worked out a lot of the kinks over the last, 7-8 months since we launched, which is why we launched kind of softly and quietly. I wanted that season of learning so I could better understand what our customers wanted from us today and what our sellers did. And we're co-creating our business with them today. So it's an exciting time to be part of it. But it is a different business and a different business model.
Yes.
And I lost a lot of the women that used to represent us, and that's okay. If they wanted an MLM business, which meant that they were able to build teams or any variation of that, I felt like that was fantastic. It just wasn't going to be the opportunity with Counter.
Would you ever raise private equity funds for the current business that you're operating?
No, not
Lesson
right now.
learned.
I built a business that I sold for $1 billion. And I don't say that with arrogance. It's just, to me, it's something I am proud of because there aren't a whole lot of women that have done it. I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I want to build a successful company that lasts the length of time. And if someday we go public and we become the next L'Oreal or whatever, great. But right now, I'm just sort of taking things one day at a time. And I don't see private equity in my future. I mean, I reserve the right to change my mind, but I think that one of the things I learned a long time ago from Mickey Drexler, if people don't know him, he was most recently the head of J. Crew. He started a brand, Alex Mill, but he came up at Gap and created Old Navy, Madewell, all these brands. And what he always said is profitability is optionality. It gives you options to do what you want to do. So right now, I would rather have a smaller, highly profitable business that allows me to do what I do than go take in a bunch of external capital from a big private equity firm. That's not to say I wouldn't raise $1 million or $2 million, but I'm not going to be in a situation where I'm beholden to someone else again. It's just not going to happen.
Yes. A few hot takes from you on beauty. What is a beauty must-have?
First of all, water. Okay, just period. If you want your skin to look good and you want to feel more beautiful, drink more water. From my perspective, like on a counter side, like I believe so much in our vitamin C serum, and I think vitamin C, I think ours is the best. I'm sure there are others that are great, but just like it gives you that radiance. And I think it's something that everyone absolutely should be wearing, or some serum that makes their skin feel more dewy and radiant.
What's a beauty item that you think is overrated?
Foundation.
I know.
Really?
Why?
Sell it. Because I just think that most women are beautiful without it. I'm not saying you can't have like a little tinted moisturizer or a light touch foundation, but I see women that cover their faces in these huge, so much makeup and so much contouring and everything. And I'm like, you're beautiful as you are. Why don't you just slightly enhance your wonderful attributes that you've already got rather than trying to paint a face on? I just don't think that women need it.
Yeah.
And we sell foundation, and especially when people have blemishes or whatever, the beauty industry is constantly telling you that there's something wrong with you. You should know as a consumer, why do you think they're doing that? So they can sell you a lot of product. That's how they make their money. And you're thinking you need a contouring brush and you need a contouring this and you need foundation and this lipstick and that. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Most women are pretty attractive with their natural faces. And yes, a little brow gel, a little mascara, whatever can, a little lip. Yeah, for sure. But I think it's overdone oftentimes. And I think it serves the wrong people. It serves the corporations, not the consumer.
Once again, we've come up on all of these topics that could be their own deep dives. Capitalism is behind so many consumer products. And
it's unbelievable.
I'm telling you, you need X, Y, and Z because it'll make you look better. And they're making it up so that you buy from them so that they get more money.
By the way, let's just also call a spade a spade. Tell me how many of the major corporations in the beauty industry and personal care industry are run by women? Can you name any?
Good point.
So who controls all the spending in the United States of America and globally? We do. We women do. And this also goes back to private equity. Everything's always run by men. But they're serving women. Mm-hmm. We are the ones that should be calling the shots. We are the ones that should be leading the companies. We are the ones that should be choosing which products we use and why, and not being told by men that our wrinkles, make us look haggard. Somehow they look distinguished and we look haggard. No. That's just part of the aging process. So anyway, I feel strongly about this.
What is one of the biggest misunderstandings about beauty today?
That's a really good question. I would say, because it's so much in my world, that if a brand says they're natural or clean, that they are. And I'm here to tell you that just because someone says they're clean or natural or organic means absolutely nothing.
All right, now we're going to the last 3 questions I ask every guest. This first one, can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business? And it can really be a system for anything.
I'm a very routine-oriented person. I have ADHD. For sure. Like anyone that works with me know I can barely sit still, whatever. But I do well by doing the same things every day. Like I get up at the same time every day. I have the same morning routine. I drink my water. I drink my Sarah Raggi green juice with lemon in it. I have my cup of coffee that I make at home. I go to the office most of the time at the same time of day. I eat the same thing for breakfast. I eat the same thing for lunch. Like I find when you are running a business and your life is totally frenetic, because I have 3 kids and a husband and friends and a ton going on, that for me, just sticking with the same routine every day, same with when I work out. I work at the exact same time, 6:45, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 a.m. on Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings. Like these routines really work for me. I find that people that like kind of are all over the map are less successful. So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing that I think is I always outsource to the best of my ability anything administrative. Like, and now that my kids can drive, I'm like, no, you go buy that paper, because I'd rather be there for the important moments than spend all my time doing the things that could be done through Amazon.
Okay, so the next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or story that's impacting business and culture today. So for this one, there's been a lot of media buzz lately around the fact that Estee Lauder is going to do, or wants, maybe exploring is a better way to put it, a bundled sale of Too Faced, Smashbox, and Dr. Jart. And they're going to focus more, if they do that sale, on the digital native brands like The Ordinary and Le Labo. So what is your take on this?
I mean, Estee Lauder already doesn't like me. I think that is an example. So we've talked a lot about private equity. We haven't talked a lot about strategic acquisition of brands in beauty or any other thing. I think that certain of those brands were purchased and probably not integrated or managed well within the organization. And so it's easy to blame the brand because you don't stick with the original founder's vision. There's a reason why people buy. I don't know Dr. Jart's as well, but some of these brands I do know, and I know some people that started these brands. You don't allow for that original visionary to continue to think about where things need to go. You try to push it into the corporate structure, and then they fall out of favor with consumers, or they're out of favor with what you want to do as a company. So I would say those brands may or may not have been managed particularly well, which is why it's so easy to go to the sexy, shiny new object and say these digital. But I don't know that it's so much about the fact that they're digital, except that they may have more control. I mean, The Ordinary has been enormously successful. Labo has been enormously successful because they nailed it on fragrance, like on Santal number 33, et cetera, that whole Santal world. And fragrance is having a moment. So of course they're going to lean into that right now because fragrance has been exploding. But I promise you'll be having the same conversation about those brands the next number of years because it's all cyclical and oftentimes they don't integrate them properly. This is me from the outside having no idea, but I could tell you that's probably part of it.
Yes. Okay, so let's end with a listener question. This question comes from Sarah, who followed the entire Beautycounter situation very closely. So she goes, "Hi, Gregg. If you could talk to someone who's scared to start over because their last chapter ended painfully, what would you tell them?" And we don't know exactly what type of chapter this is, so interpret that as you want.
Better to have lost in love than never to have loved at all. So one, I think that the last chapter may not end, but there was probably a lot of sweetness in that. And so one, pull from it what you loved and remember that it's better to have had that experience than not to have had it at all. There was a quote that I saw on Instagram a long time ago that really resonated with me that I tell people oftentimes when they're going through a difficult time, which is, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically the sentiment of it as I think about it today is, who's to say that what you left behind was better than what you will have in front of you? Mm-hmm. Those weren't the right words, but the sentiment is true, which is, who's to say that starting over, whether that's in a personal relationship, in a business relationship, isn't going to be sweeter than what you had in the past? And I think that there are the facts of what happened. This is something that I've had to really think about with respect to Beautycounter. You and I could talk for the next 25 hours of my backstory on what happened. The fact is, I sold a company, it went out of business, I bought out of foreclosure, and I have an opportunity to start again. If you dig deep and have the confidence in yourself, and you don't say all the stories around the story, you can say, okay, well, I'm starting a new company. And you're not bringing all the baggage of the past with you. We've all had a bad breakup where you think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get through this. And you do, and then you fall in love again. Mm-hmm. So I would say fall in love again, give it another shot, dig deep, trust your intuition, trust your gut. And if your gut instinct is saying that was really hard and painful, but I'm ready to put it behind me because I know that there's a better future for me, then go for it. I would not live in the past. I would look to the future.
Okay. Well, Gregg, thank you so much for coming on the
Thanks
show.
for having me.
This was such an amazing conversation. I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I think being here with you, it really surpassed my expectations. I think your story, I still stand by what I said earlier. You need a book and you need a Netflix doc stat, but you're so inspiring in the fact that you've gone through this chapter and you are so in it again. And you have that same vision and that same enthusiasm that you had when you started, but now you have this really textured experience behind you, right? So I'm excited to watch Counter explode from here.
Well, thank you so much. I hope it explodes from here. It's always harder to do it than you think it will be, but I'm really excited. And I hope that our conversation is helpful to other people, because I think we women need to support one another and share our stories so that other people don't make the mistakes that you've made and learn from your failures and successes. So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. Before you go, take a second to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And if you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast. It massively helps the work I do to bring this show to life. And if you have a friend who is as obsessed with business and culture as you are, send this episode to them, because sharing the show is one of the best ways to support it. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammy Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammy Cohen, and produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.